Turn to Daniel chapter 1. The book of Daniel is a remarkable book for a number of reasons. And the man Daniel, who is dealt with in a number of the records and whose revelation is given throughout the book, is a man who is incredible for many reasons. He's inspiring. His life is inspiring considering the circumstance of his life and how he handles the circumstances he finds himself in. Because as a very young man, he is taken captive to a different land. And that's what we begin to read about in Daniel chapter 1. And as we get into this record of Daniel, you'll see more reasons why Daniel is a man of such incredible influence. His influence is what we're going to focus on as we go through these records this evening on Daniel. The influence that he had right then and there in his lifetime with the people around him, as well as how far that influence extends, because it extends through the centuries that follow. In Daniel chapter 1, we're introduced to Daniel and to how he came to be in the place that he was. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem, and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. And he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. And the king being Nebuchadnezzar, spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princes, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored, and skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge and understanding what? Science. Understanding science, which becomes very significant as we go along in understanding the influence that Daniel has. He was one of these men that had great understanding of science, and the science of the time that was the most important one, the oldest science, the most exacting science, was astronomy. And that's very important in understanding Daniel and what happens. And such, as goes on to say in verse 4, has had ability in them to stand in the king's palace. That these had to be men that knew how to take care of themselves, how to possess themselves. They weren't some, goofballs that were hanging out in the locker room and just goofing off. And whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. Now among these were the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. These 4 men out of Judah. So Judah, that's God's people. The kingdom has been divided for a long time. You had the kingdom of Israel, which is 10 of the tribes, and the kingdom of Judah. The kingdom of Israel went into captivity first, long before this with the Assyrians. Now, Judah is taken captive by Nebuchadnezzar into Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar is a famous figure in history. One of the great wonders, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world were the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, and Nebuchadnezzar was responsible for them. The Babylonian Empire was the greatest empire up to that time, and one of the greatest in all of history. Nebuchadnezzar had conquered all the peoples around him, including the Judeans, and he brought these people captive to Babylon. That's not a situation that you would like to find yourself in, being taken captive. And yet, the reason why that happened was because they had been idolatrous for so long. And God warned them and warned them and warned them, and yet they never took heed to that warning. And God told them that if they didn't, this stuff was going to happen. Nevertheless, they never turned to God. And yet, and very importantly for every person, even today, God always will take care of those who believe Him. No matter what circumstance we find ourselves in, no matter how negative the situation, no matter what the political situation is, the world situation, when men and women believe God, no matter what, He will still take care of them, as He does Daniel and his 3 friends here. Well, this wonderful record goes on to talk about the first challenge that these men face, and we're not going to get into that today. We're going to just skip down to verse 17. As for these 4 children, and I love that they call them children because they were so young, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. Who gave them knowledge and skill?
God.
God did. It wasn't that they were just book smart. It wasn't that they were intellectuals. More importantly, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. If you ever read the book of Daniel, you'll find how great his visions and dreams are. Not easy reading, not reading that is easily understood, but he had incredible revelation from God. Many of those prophecies, many of that revelation is still to be fulfilled in the future. Verse 19. And the king, Nebuchadnezzar, communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king. And in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm. And Daniel continued even unto the 1st year of King Cyrus. He found them 10 times wiser, better than all the magicians and astrologers. Magicians and astrologers, you have the true science of astronomy, and you have the counterfeit of it, astrology. And for this group of people that we're talking about here, the Babylonians or Chaldeans, they really got into this stuff big time. They are the ones that it really begins with. Astrology and magic begins with these guys. And they spread it. And yet you have to understand something about who these people are. Those people that are identified here as magicians belong to a caste or a sect called the Magi. And that group had its origins about 100 years before the time that we're reading about here. The time that we're reading about here, the life of Daniel, takes place about 500 years before the birth of Jesus Christ. The Magi date back 100 years earlier. And they were part of a religion that was founded by a man named Zoroaster. That religion, I won't go into great detail, but it had a lot of similarities to Judaism. They believed a lot of the same things, a lot of the right things. And at some point around this time, it splits. That group of Magi split into 2 different groups. One that stay faithful to the teachings of Zoroaster, and the other group gets heavy into the counterfeit. The one group would be those that would be into legitimate astronomy. The other group would be those that would focus on astrology, although they may have also been astronomers. The one group is ones that were into all the magic, and from where we get the word magician and kind of what you think of normally with it. The other one, they weren't saying pick any card and watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat or any of that stuff, or any of the devilish stuff. So you have these men, and it's important to understand them because it is from this same group, not those people at that time, but this same caste, sect called the Magi, that we find those men that traveled at the time that Jesus Christ was born, about a year and a half afterward actually, to come and see him. Well, let's look at Daniel chapter 2. And it says in verse 21, to point out that again, Daniel continued even into the first year of King Cyrus. King Cyrus is from a different nation. What's going to happen during the time that Daniel's in captivity is the Babylonians are going to be conquered by another people, by the Medes and Persians. And that kingdom will overcome the Babylonians, and now they take over. So Cyrus is a Darius that we'll read about if we get there, and Cyrus are kings of the Persians, who then take over after. Let's go to chapter 2. Chapter 2 is a record. Most often when reading the book of Daniel, people will read about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who are the same fellows that we just read about with different names, Mishael, Azariah, and Hananiah. Daniel's name is changed to Belteshazzar, but he happily was called Daniel most of the time anyway in the book of Daniel. I guess, because it's got his name on it, he gets to pick. Verse 1. But chapter 2 is a different story. I started to say something. So we're most often familiar with the record that I kind of skipped over of when we first meet these guys, and the record of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and the burning fiery furnace, and the record of Daniel in the lion's den. Seldom do people go to this one, chapter 2. And in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams, wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. So he has this dream that just freaks him out, and wakes up and can't go back to sleep. Then the king commanded to call the magicians, and the astrologers, and the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans, for to show the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king. And the king said unto them, I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac, O king, live forever. Tell thy servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the thing's gone from me. I don't remember it. I'll know it if you tell it to me, though. If ye will not make known unto me the dream, with the interpretation thereof, ye shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill. No pressure here, fellas, but here's what I want you to do. I want you to tell me not only the interpretation, I want you to tell me the dream. I know you could just tell me on the dream, but I'll know you're not making this stuff up, because if you tell me the dream, then I'll recognize it, and I'll know, yeah, that was it. Verse 6. But if you show the dream and the interpretation thereof, ye shall receive of me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore, show me the dream and the interpretation thereof. Verse 7. They answered again and said, let the king tell the servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation of it. Nah, we're not going to do that. You just tell us the dream, we'll tell you what it's about. Verse 8. The king answered and said, I know of a certainty that you would gain the time. You're just stalling, because you see the thing is gone from me. But if you will not make known unto me the dream, there is but one decree for you, for ye have prepared lying and corrupt words to speak before me, till the time be changed, until you think I'm going to forget about it or something. Therefore, tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can show me the interpretation thereof. So he's digging in here, isn't he? Yes. Okay. And you would think that these guys, if they are so wise, him being the king and all powerful, they would have the brains to not keep insisting that he tell them the dream, but they do. The Chaldeans, verse 10, answered before the king and said, There is not a man upon the earth that can show the king's matter. Nobody can do that. Therefore, there is no king, lord, nor ruler that asks such a thing at any magician or astrologer or Chaldean. It's a rare thing that the king requireth, and there's none other that can show up before the king, except the gods whose dwelling is not with flesh. They said, no, this is unreasonable. This is unfair. Nobody can do this. You shouldn't even be asking this. Verse 12. For this cause the king was angry and very what? Furious. And commanded to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. See, I told you he wouldn't like it. I told you if they had any brains, they wouldn't be arguing with them. And the decree went forth that the wise men should be slain, and they sought Daniel and his fellows to be slain. So Daniel's not there. Daniel's got nothing to do with this at this point. But these guys have so made the king mad that he wants every wise man, everybody that he ever went to for counsel, he wants all of them killed. So now Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego find themselves with their head on the chopping block. Verse 14. Then Daniel answered with counsel and wisdom, because that's what he's known for, to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, which had gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree so hasty? Other versions have harsh from the king. Then Arioch made the thing known to Daniel. He tells him what's been going on. Then Daniel went in and desired of the king that he would give him time and that he would show the king the interpretation. He says, give me a bit of time here and I'm going to do this. And you'll see what he wanted the time for in the next verse. Then Daniel went to his house and made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions. He tells them what's going on. Verse 18, that they would desire mercies of God in heaven concerning this secret, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. He wants time to pray. He wants time to go back home, tell the rest of the guys what's going on, and for them to go to God and seek his help, his mercy, his revelation in the situation. Verse 19. Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. And he changeth the time and the seasons. He removeth kings, and he setteth up kings. He giveth wisdom unto the wise, and knowledge to them that know understanding. He revealeth the deep and secret things. He knoweth what is in the darkness, and the light dwelleth with him. I thank thee and praise thee, O thou God of my fathers, who hast given me wisdom and might, and hast made known unto me now what we desired of thee. For thou hast made known unto us the king's matter. Isn't that a great prayer? Mm-hmm. Verse 24. Therefore Daniel went in unto Arioch, whom the king had ordained to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus unto him, destroy not the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in therefore before the king, and I will show unto the king the interpretation. So these wise men, the Magi, they owe their lives to Daniel. Mm-hmm. Had he not done what he did here, every one of them, would have been destroyed. And you understand right there a lot of why Daniel had such influence over them. Not only because of the position he was appointed to, but also because of what he did for them in interceding in the situation with the king. And not just saving himself and his friends, but all of them who couldn't answer the king's dream and only made the king mad. Where did I leave off? 25? Well, we'll go there. Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus unto him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah, that will make known unto the king the interpretation. The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, Art thou able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen, and the interpretation thereof? Daniel answered in the presence of the king, and said, The secret which the king hath demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers show unto the king, but there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets. He didn't say, I can do it. I'm the wisest of them all. He says, there is a God in heaven that can reveal secrets, and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Thy dream and the visions of thy head upon thy bed are these. As for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into my mind upon thy bed, what should come to pass hereafter. And he that revealeth secrets maketh known to thee what shall come to pass. But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living, but for their sakes that shall make known the interpretation to the king, and that thou mightest know the thoughts of thy heart. Now I won't go into the dream, save some time here. The dream has to do with him seeing an image made out of 4 different types of material or metals. And when Daniel interprets the dream, those 4 different parts, the head made out of gold and the body made out of silver and so forth, they all represent different kingdoms. It never says who exactly those kingdoms are. Most people believe those kingdoms are successive. That's clear from the dream. And most people believe that the first kingdom it's talking about is the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian kingdom. And then the second one is the kingdom of the Persians and Medes that replaced them, led by Darius Cyrus in the Bible. And then the third one they believe to be the kingdom of Alexander the Great, because he conquers that whole region. And the fourth to be the kingdom of Rome, which ends up conquering that one. And at the same, out of that comes also then a kingdom that will be established from which there will be no end. You know, it's probably that. But because nowhere in the Bible does it say definitively that this is what each of those kingdoms are, and because some would have that to be fulfilled all in the time period of present history, when it would seem to be that some of that is going to be fulfilled in the future, I'm not going to say that's exactly what it is. And that's why I'm spending a lot of time on that. Verse 46 then. Then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and worshipped Daniel, and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors unto him. The king answered unto Daniel and said, Of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods, and a Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, seeing that thou couldst reveal this secret. Do you see how when a person's really walking with God and they do great signs, miracles, and wonders, it's God that gets the glory and not them? And it's one of the great tests of the genuine versus the counterfeit. Does the man get glorified, or does God get glorified? And in the Bible, when you see these men that do great things, it's God that gets glorified. You see it throughout the book of Daniel. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego escape the burning fiery furnace, it's God that gets glorified. Later on, and it doesn't look like we're going to have the time to go into the record fully, when Daniel escapes the mouths of the lions, it's God that gets glorified in that record as well. You know, you see some wonderful, interesting parallels between Daniel and Joseph, another man known for interpreting dreams, another young man at the time who found himself in captivity, and how both of them, they just didn't allow the circumstance that they found themselves in defeat them. They didn't let that terrible, terrible situation be something that they got so depressed about that they couldn't rise above. Instead, they continued to trust God, and God not only delivered them, but elevated their estate as a result of their stand. Verse 48. Then the king made Daniel a great man, and gave him many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. He is the chief over all of the other ones. He is responsible and over all of those magicians as well as all the other leaders in that area. He's the number one guy. Just like Joseph was second only to Pharaoh, Daniel is second only to Nebuchadnezzar. And he rules on a day-by-day the whole province, the whole area of Babylon. Verse 49, then Daniel requested of the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel sat in the gate of the king. So that's how Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego come to be in their positions, and it's the next chapter that tells that story about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But we'll jump over to chapter 6. As I said, we're not going to have time to go through this record. It's a wonderful record. I'll kind of do a quick summary of it. In this record, some time has passed, and these men become jealous, not necessarily the magi, but the rulers. They become jealous of Daniel, and they're looking to get rid of him. And they figure this guy, there's nothing that he's really doing wrong. He's not, shortchanging the king. He's not putting money in his own pocket. He's not doing anything mean to the people. If we're going to find any reason to get rid of him, it's going to have to do something to do with his God and his worship of his God. And so they convinced the king, Darius, to make a law. To make a law that for 30 days nobody can ask anybody but the king for anything. They know that they've got Daniel here because they know Daniel prays every day. So the king makes this law, and the law of the Persians cannot be changed. It cannot be changed. And then, one day they see Daniel, and Daniel, he's praying with the shutters open, the shades up, openly. Anybody can see him. He's not trying to hide it. And 3 times a day he'd pray. And they see him praying, and they say, boy, we got him now. And they go to the king and say, King, didn't you make this law that nobody could ask any god or any man for anything except you? And didn't you make that a law that can't be changed? And he said, yeah. And they said, well, Daniel, he's breaking the law. And the king loves Daniel, and he feels real badly about it because he knows that now he's going to be thrown into a den of lions. And he feels terrible, and he can't sleep, he can't eat, but nonetheless, throws Daniel in the den of lions. And then the next day, he goes to see how Daniel's doing, and he says, Daniel, your God, he tells him the night before, your God will deliver you. And then he goes, was I right? Daniel, you there? Did he do it? And Daniel says, oh yeah, I'm fine, I'm great. And then the king gets him out, and again, he promotes Daniel in that province as well. It's a great record, the life of Daniel. Not just to see what he did and how he believed God no matter what, but because of that influence that reaches all the way to the time of Christ, because what he taught those men while he was over them about the true science of astronomy and the greatest significance of it, which was that God's word was written in the stars, and it would prophesy about the Messiah that he taught to them, and that's why they came looking for him at the time of his birth. God bless.